Well, hello and welcome to Beaverdale Books. We appreciate you joining us on this rainy Sunday. And really, is there any better place to be on a rainy Sunday than in a bookstore? Maybe home reading a book, but we have a very exciting month ahead of events, all kinds of events, starting with R.E. Bellsmith tomorrow night. That's November 4th, followed by Forest Lone Fight on November 7th, Carol Rose Spalding on November 19th, and many, many more. This is our listing for November, which is packed. So pick up one of these event calendars. They're at the front desk, or visit our website, or sign up for our newsletter. And then you'll, we're very kind. We only send a newsletter out once or twice a month, so we don't fill up your inbox. Okay, today we welcome Joyce Rupp, whose newest book, Vessels of Love, explores aging through themes of acceptance, loss, joy in grandparenting, and self-compassion. Though it primarily targets older adults, the prayers and poems also resonate with younger readers, providing comfort and reflection on life transitions. The book fosters a spirit of kinship and gratitude, making it a valuable resource for anyone navigating the journey of elderhood. Joyce is a celebrated writer, spiritual midwife, and speaker, known for over 30 best-selling books on grief, midlife spirituality, and nature. She also wrote a memoir about her 450-mile walk across northern Spain. In addition to her writing, she founded the Boundless Compassion Program in 2007 and serves as a spiritual guide. A member of the Servite community, Joyce volunteered with hospice for 15 years, and she lives in West Des Moines, Iowa. So please help me in a very warm welcome for Joyce Rupp.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and Jan, thank you, and Alice, thank you, and Hunter, and all the staff here at Beaverdale Books. I'm just so thankful that we have this wonderful independent bookstore here in Des Moines. It's just great. So, well, if you haven't seen me for a while, I've gotten a little older. I was at a memorial yesterday with about 200 people, and I was facilitating the memorial, and I hadn't seen a lot of people for over 40 years. And we all had to look at each other twice, you know, and be sure we knew one another. So I'm so glad that you're here today, and I want to talk about my book, but I also want to talk about being an elder, being in elderhood. So I think what I'll do, in fact, I'm quite sure, I hope I do this, I want to start by talking about why I wrote the book, why it has the title that it has, and then I'd like to read some of the prayers and poems, but not fully. I'm just going to read enough to give you a taste of, so I can talk about the topic some more. I just finished a companion book to it. It's called The Years of Ripening, and it's actually essays, 40-some essays on the same topics that are in this book, but I couldn't say a whole lot that I wanted to in prayers and poems, so I thought I just have to do a second book. So that's what I did. Anyway, and that's going to come out next fall. So, how I came to write this book. I was 57 when my mother was 84, and she passed. And I thought I knew what my mother was experiencing. But I'm 81 now, and let me tell you, I didn't have a clue, really. I thought I understood, and when she would say things like, all my friends are gone, I would think, well, you have us, you know. But it's so different when your peers are not there anymore. And so I learned a lot from my mother as I reflected on it. And I wrote a book called Fly While You Still Have Wings, which was my perspective from much younger still. So now that I'm in my 80s, I feel like I can have a better sense of that. But someone asked me last week, I was doing a couple of events in the Omaha area, and someone said to me, how did you know about writing all of that in that book? You're only 81 and you're writing about 80s and 90s. And I said, well, I've been listening a lot, for one thing. But I actually, 5 years ago now, I started a group called Elderhood Explorers. And I started it with my own community members. They were from, oh, do I have
The
to say,
people in the back.
do I have to say it all over again?
No. A little bit louder.
Okay, I'll try.
you.
I'll try to be louder. Okay, so I started this group called Elderhood Explorers, and the group consisted of 90 to 97-year-olds, and they really were quite physically fragile. I mean, they had walkers and wheelchairs and canes, but mentally they were really alert and with it, and very curious about what is it like internally to be an elder, not just physically. And that was my whole goal, was to look at the spirituality of elderhood. What does it mean to be in your 80s and 90s? We have more and more people in this country that are living longer, and it's going to be very common pretty soon to have people in their 80s and 90s who are still relatively healthy, you know, who still have a life, so to speak. So what I discovered then when I started this group, I thought, well, I'll get some chapters from books on aging, and we'll discuss those, and we'll have an hour and a half together. But what I found out is that there were no books that I could just take a whole book and study it with them. I had to take pieces from here and there, because almost all the books on aging are written for 60s and 70s. And it's very, very different when you're in your 60s and 70s than when you get into your 80s and 90s. And I'll just share a few of those things with you. For one thing, energy. You just don't have as much energy when you get to be 80. When I was 60 and even early 70s, I still had a lot more energy than I have now. I still have quite a bit, but not like I used to. I know that's true. Another big thing, when I was 60, I thought, you know, I got 20, 30 years at least to live. But when you turn 80, you go, maybe not so much, you know. So death is a lot closer when you get into those last decades. And not in a quote, bad way, it's just in a more real way, is how I view it anyway. Another big thing is that when I was younger, I had so many friends that were alive, and I could meet for coffee and that. And the crowd keeps getting smaller. You know, Joyce Hutchison, many of you knew Joyce, who was director of hospice and oncology nurse. And Joyce always said, I know more people on the other side of this life than this side. And I believe that now. All Saints Day, I thought I could make a long litany of the people I know who aren't with me anymore physically. When you're 60 and 70, you're reasonably healthy yet. But when you get into your 80s and 90s, usually there are a lot more doctor appointments and more medical things to be tended. I think one of the big ones, one of the two big ones, one is when you're younger, you easily find purpose in your life. And it's harder to find purpose at the older you get. There is a lot of purpose, but it changes. And it's much more presence than it is being active. Although I know a lot of people that are still very involved in their 90s in social justice issues and a lot of other things. But it does change as you get older. And this is a big one. Yesterday I was with someone. I wasn't talking about aging, but the person that came up to me was talking about her getting older. And she said, you know, people just treat me like I'm invisible, she said, and it's like I don't count anymore. And I you know, you're shaking your head, and it's so true. It's like you just pass by. It's like you don't even exist hardly. You know, I said to this lady, she had white hair. Like I said, once you get white hair, that's it. You know, kind of. And we both laughed, but we also knew it was very real. So I want to read one of my poems for you. It's called Old Friends, and it's about having purpose. So, Old Friends. She slowly, ever so slowly, pulls on the too long, too big, yellow rubber gloves. They fit poorly on her wrinkled hands, bony and spotted. Next, she lifts the small latch, carefully opens the wire door and reaches inside. Chirps greet the entrance of her shaky hands as she begins to house clean the tiny living space. The parakeet steps lightly aside, trusting the intrusion as Rosalie swaps out the home that hosts her beloved. It's easy to see they have become old friends. Now, I knew Rosalie. She was 93 when she was taking care of her friend's parakeet. And I was just amazed at her. Rosalie had had a stroke, so she was somewhat incapacitated physically. And I saw the joy on this woman's face when she was cleaning that bird cage. Not everybody'd have joy on their face, but she was so happy to be able to take care of that bird. And I just thought she has a purpose here. She knows that she's doing something that's going to be a benefit to the bird and the owner of the bird as well. And so I think to encourage people to have a purpose in their life and to help them see it, because they have one up many times, but they just don't recognize it. And one other thing, when we're younger, we have a big concern about being accepted, trying to fit into society. And as we get older, for most people, there's less and less concern about that. Lately, I've been saying that my favorite line is the last line from Gone with the Wind, which you know. Frankly, dear, I don't give a damn. So that's why I wrote the book. For the final point. But the title of the book, Vessels of Love, how I came to that is I just kept thinking about these wonderful people I was with in the Elderhood Explorers group. And I was so inspired by them, by their attitude and their spirit. And I noticed that they really had let go of a lot of judgment. They weren't crotchety and crabby. They were just so kind to one another, and their whole attitude was really great. I remembered a line from a long time ago. I bet I was 40 when I heard or read this. It was Billy Graham, and I don't know what he was talking about, but anyway, he said he was talking about how unimportant a lot of material things are, and he said, "Did you ever see a hearse? Did you ever see a U-Haul following a hearse?" and that really got me, because I thought that's just it, The only thing we take with us when we die is love. That's it, None of those other things are going to count. And a year ago from December, I was at an 80th birthday party, and I was talking to someone I didn't know, and she was telling me about all these wonderful things in her house that she'd collected on many travels. And she said, "I love all of those." She said, "I'm never going to give up one of them." And I didn't say anything, and I thought, oh, you will. One by one, you either give them away or they'll be taken from you, because you're not going to be able to keep them anymore. And so I began imaging older people as really a reservoir of love, really just something that receives and gives very, very easily, very, very naturally. I was in Omaha last week, and I was talking to a group about this. And as I was driving into Omaha, I was thinking about that image of vessels and what I was going to say to them. And I thought, I wish I could find a Nebraska image for a vessel. And I looked over, and there was an irrigation ditch, And I said to them, really, an irrigation ditch, it has to have water, and then it flows out. I said, I don't think it would have been a good title for my book. But it's that whole notion of, to our very last breath, if we can, we're going to be giving as well as receiving in some way. And so that's where that title came from. Okay. Oh, one last thing I want to say about that, and then I'd like to go into the book. Yes, a major challenge for me personally when I was writing about this was, how do I balance what's real in getting older with what's also really wonderful about getting older? Because there are both of those. And what I've never liked about any book on aging is when it's what I call a cheerleader book. I mean, older people don't need cheerleaders. They need compassionate people. They need people who listen, but not cheerleaders to tell them you can do these things and so on, because a lot of people can't. I have a wonderful physician, and about 2 years ago, he came in and he has my chart, and he says, "Well, hello, Miss Healthy." I go, "Oh, I'm so happy about this, you know." And anyway, we had a talk, and what he was trying to say to me is, you're not always going to be this way, and you need to think about that and accept it. And what he said to me was, he said, you know, these people that are 101 and they're mowing their lawns, you know, or they're 95 and they're, you know, skydiving and that, he said, they're the exception. But when people read about that and they're older, they think they're going to be that exception, and they're not going to be. And it was really good for me to hear that. So that was January. In March, I got COVID, and let me tell you, I don't ever want to get COVID again. I was down and out, really, for a week, and it took me 2 months to get my energy back. And so what that said to me was, you know, you have to accept your life as it is, and it can change very quickly. But everyone seems to think they're the exception for that. Okay, so I tried in the book then to really balance it with and be honest about what is difficult in growing older, and what is really, be aware of what is so great about the later years of life. So I didn't do this on purpose, but the first prayer that I have in there is titled, "Accepting the Life I Now Have." And it's the first one just because I did everything in alphabetical order. Okay? However, I've had so many people already who have purchased the book who have said, that's my prayer, accepting the life I now have. And it's really true for everyone, of every age. But I think particularly, you know, as we get into the 80s and 90s, you know, when you're younger, if you don't like the house or the apartment you're living in, you do have an option, you know, to move somewhere else. But if you're 85, 90, and you're going to go into assisted living, you don't have a lot of options anymore. And it's true with a lot of other things as well. So accepting the life I have now, I'll just share a couple of these. I renew my resolve to leave behind aspects of life that no longer fit for me, to divest myself of them in order to gain inner freedom and peace. One of the things that was really not challenging, but calling to me, it was right before COVID started, and I thought, you know, I have loved being with groups. I love teaching. I love leading retreats, but I've always wanted to write more than anything else, and I can't do both anymore. And so I'm going to stop doing public speaking. And, you know, at first I was real happy about it, and then I got a little distance from it, and I thought, I really miss people, you know. So, I think we don't just make one decision about it, we make it over and over again. And so when this book came out, of course, publishers expect you to market your books now. So it was like, so where are you going to speak and do book signings? And I said, I compare myself to a little groundhog. I said, I'm just out for a little while, and then I'm going back again. So I said, don't get any ideas about me running around doing this for a long time, because I'm not going to. But I'm happy to do it for a while. So another one was, I rejoice at the knowledge, insights, and wisdom that have deepened and expanded my internal and external approach to living. One of the wonderful gifts, I think, about aging is that we have time to know ourselves. And, you know, and so we don't need to keep running around and being in that hurried pace anymore. And to have time to reflect and really get to know ourselves in a way maybe that we haven't before. And enjoy life as it is. That's been a wonderful gift for myself. I have a lot more time to journal and do reflection. Another one is, I forgo hanging on to old dreams no longer achievable due to physical limitations, because clinging to those dreams impedes my contentment. You know, those old dreams can be all kinds of things, and I still remember so clearly 3 years ago I went cross-country skiing out at Raccoon River Park, and my hands were killing me after I got done, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. My arthritis is mostly in my hands, and they're getting so weak. And so I took my skis over to Holy Trinity, to their sale, and I said, I can't use these anymore. But I did get snowshoes the next year. And they're a little easier to do. Yes. But then this past September, I've always wanted to go to Glacier National Park, and I finally got to go there. But I knew, even before I went, that I couldn't do those difficult trails I used to do, the ones that were kind of straight up and 14,000 feet. So I had to choose ones that were less difficult, and I loved it just as much, but it was different for me. So there are a lot of things that we need to adjust to, and I do think the middle name for a lot of people in older years is adjustment. You just keep adjusting all the time to lots of different ways. I have a prayer called Always Room for Gratitude, and another way I would say that is look for the good in the not so good. I know a lot of older people that do that, and I have mentors of aging from the past who could find the good in the not so good, and you really live a lot happier, when you can do that. So I won't read that one to you. Another prayer that I have is a blessing of awe, and that can be such a positive one for older people. I heard, she's 95 now, and last spring I heard this particular person say, she said to me, did you ever notice there's so many different colors of red when you're out for a walk? And I thought, wow, she is really being mindful and attentive, and she's walking more slowly, and she's really noticing. There's so many different ways to have awe in our life, and I listed a lot of those in that particular prayer. And even the whole thing of how we, today, where we live and how we live, there's so much happening, and I know a lot of it is challenging and difficult culturally, but there's also fabulous things happening in science. And I don't know, one of my favorite magazines is National Geographic, because I love reading about all the oceanography and what's happening in the cosmos. And so I think if older people stay curious and they read, or if they can't read, they can do Audible, but stay in that sense of awe, and that can be very, very helpful. Okay. I have a creed for experiencing loss, and it's different than the accepting the life I now have. It's real more about particular losses. But I also have a psalm of lament and a psalm of rejoicing, and I put them side by side because I think that not enough older people lament what's happening to them. I think that's the downside of religion, that you're supposed to have faith, and if you have faith, you don't cry out in sadness and sorrow about the things that are happening to you. But they are happening, and I think it's really important to lament, to acknowledge that that's happening. And rejoicing is the same way, I think, finding things to rejoice. So the connecting with the Psalm of Lament in the same vein, I deliberately, for sure, I wanted to write about self-compassion. I was with a group of, a week ago, Friday night, I did a little house talk on boundless compassion. And there was a priest present there among the neighborhood people. And I was talking about self-compassion, and I know this person, and he's probably one of the most compassionate ordained people that I've met in the Roman Catholic faith, ordained. And he said, it was amazing, and he said, I know I'm good about compassion with other people, but I never thought about self-compassion, And I think that's true in a lot of different ways, that people do not always give themselves the compassion they might give others. So I want to read a few of the self-compassion pieces. So I have a little introductory prayer, and then these are some of the self-compassion creed. I will not chide or berate myself for losing, dropping, or spilling things. Yeah, I hear a little titter going on there. Yeah. I accept my less than perfect self when I'm aware of my personality flaws. we're going to have some flaws until the moment we're in the coffin or ashes or however we're going to be. We get to a point where it isn't that we don't care who we are and how we are, but we accept the parts of us that we're going to carry with us forever. I do not reproach or blame myself when I cannot recall something I intend to say. I know older people get really upset with themselves when they can't remember. And it's not cognitive issues, it's just, they can't remember things. I refuse to name myself lazy or worthless when I sleep longer than usual or take naps. My mother was a hard-working farm wife, and she called herself lazy a lot in her later years of life. And we had many talks about it, and I don't know if I ever got lazy out of her or not, but I tried. And then receiving affirmations from other people and so on. Okay, I want to move on here so I don't keep you too long. The gifts of elderhood. I'll mention a few, and then I'll tell you a little story that happened last week. So taking my morning time and getting dressed, no rushing off to a demanding job. I cannot tell you, every time a plane goes over, I say, thank you, God, I'm not on it. I do. I am so grateful. I know there were so many mornings I was up at 4 and it's out at the airport by 5 and get on an early flight. And I love it that I don't have to do that anymore. Sleeping as long as I wish, going to bed as late as I want. One of the things about getting older is you forget that it's off of daylight savings time, as I did this morning. I didn't sleep late. Savoring the gold in my memories that bring satisfaction and consolation. I just love it to sit down with someone and talk about memories, memories that sustain. Being free to dress and act according to my wishes and not society's expectations. Expanding my knowledge, continuing to learn about life's wonders, and so on. Okay, so when I was reviewing this yesterday and thinking, okay, what do I want to share with you? I thought, one of the best examples I could give is from just this past Monday. And I had been away for a week doing some talks, book signings. And I got home, and I was so glad to be home. But being away for a week, I had all this list of things I was going to do. Go to the post office, get my mail, go to the bank, blah, blah, blah. So I went out, and I was all ready, and I had a flat tire in my car. And so I made a choice right there, and this is something for me of getting older. I just chose at that moment not to get upset about it. I thought, you know what? At the end of this day, it's going to be okay, whatever happens, and it's going to take time, and I've got to set aside, I'm going to do this now, and just go with the flow. My mom used to say that, like, go with the flow. So I accepted the reality of what was. Then I adjusted to the day's plans. I waited for AAA for about an hour. Then he pumped up my tire enough for me to get to Toyota. And so then I got out to Toyota, and I thought, I have a good friend that when she turned 80, her motto was, if you lose it, use it. What she meant by that was, an example she gave was she was driving over the speed limit in a residential area one day with a friend, and she knew she was going too fast, and they were kind of looking for a road sign, a street sign. Anyway, she got stopped by a patrolman, and so she said to him, when you're older, you just, you can't see those signs as well. And so I just didn't realize, I probably was going a little faster, but we were just busy looking for that sign, And I said, that works once, but maybe not twice. But anyway, so I'm out at Toyota, and I'm thinking, they were good. They were, anyway, long story short, they were really good with me, and they said they would give me a ride home and pick me up, in the shuttle. So I heard the one guy called to me, and he said, do you know how to get a shuttle? Now, I knew very well I had to text and get it probably, but I said, well, I'm not sure. So I thought, I'll let him get it for me, I'm 81. I don't need to do this. So that's what, is good about getting older. Yeah. And the other thing is being grateful. I really thanked everyone that day, from the shuttle driver to the people in the office, all those people that I worked with, the AAA guy that came, And I think gratitude just comes much more easily because when you're older, you realize that you need more assistance, and it's just there. So, okay, a couple more things, and then I'll end. Just one right. This really goes along with, this is a poem. In the first part of the book are prayers, and the second half is poems. I think for me personally, the hardest part about being the age I am is just having so many friends die. I just have so many in my life, and I just had someone September 29th, younger, 5 years younger than I am, who died of a heart attack. And I just wasn't ready for that, you know? And so you adjust your life again to one less person, and but also being able to be with her family. So this is called Leaving Us Behind. They continue to fly ahead of us like a migrating flock of snow geese, expansive soul wings spreading wide, intent on the homeward flight. We voyage on our own aging passage, separations increasing with every year. Those we knew well and loved dearly, leaving us behind, alone on the road. With every farewell, the loss increases, enlarges the gap in an emptying heart deprived of another valued presence. The region of social silence lengthens, one less person in the circle of kinship. A wonderment with each departure, shadowy questions bump into faith. Is death a release to a heavenly realm, or simply an ultimate transition? Will ancestors wait with welcoming arms, or does the self dissolve into nothingness? Do these questions matter? Not while the evacuation continues to expand the center of our hearts. I talked with a group of clergy last week, and hospice people, hospice staff, and spiritual guides. And I talked with them about something that's often not talked about with older people, and that is their thoughts and their feelings about what happens when you die, what happens on the other side. Because a lot of older people have questions about that they never had before. And they don't want to talk about it because they don't want people to think they, quote, lost their faith. But they need to talk about them. And a woman who works with hospice, I was so glad, and she said, you know what I've learned from people that I am with when they're actively dying is they don't have any questions, and they don't really care what's on the other side. What they care about is if they're peaceful. And I thought that was really good, because it takes away from you have to believe a certain way or think a certain way about death. So I'm going to do one more here. I think what I'll do is I'll read from the epilogue at the end of the book. It's a good summary, I hope. Opportunities arise for us each day to be self-giving, in spite of the aches, pains, and limitations that annoy and sidetrack us. There's always more room to give and receive love, whether this be through human relationships, nature's wonders, or the silent nurturance that comes from a spirit tenderly cradling our soul. Each day promises that the kindheartedness we pour forth from our hearts will be replenished, because we have within us a presence of faithful love that I sense grows increasingly fond of us. The poet, Joy Harjo, believed in this emptying and refilling because of what her grandfather told her. He said, "Pass this love on. It knows how to bend and will never break. It's the only thing with the give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes." His wise advice has led the 73-year-old Harjo to be a vibrant, compassionate woman who copiously shares her kindness. And so the passing on of kindness can be for us. And so that's really my vision and my goal for being older. And, you know, I'm looking at some of you who are younger, And I want to tell you a story. And for those of us that are older too, because I just wish we could put younger people in touch with older people. And this is what happened in my life. So when I first started being in ministry, I was a teacher for 5 years in elementary school. I never did know what I was doing, so I did get out of it. And I finally began working with high school and college students for retreats. But anyway, so I had this junior high class, and they were supposed to have a service project. And really, honestly, I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. And so I thought, well, you know, we could visit a nursing home. Now, this was back in early 70s, I think it was. And nursing homes then, not care centers, not skilled care, they were really nursing homes. And they were a mess for the most part. So I had never visited a nursing home. I just thought it would be a good idea for us to do it. So we had 2 carloads of kids I took, and 7th and 8th grade. And honestly, we got in there, and I just thought, what did I do to these young people? I mean, people were sitting around, lolling on their chairs. They were sitting in their urine. It was a horrible experience. And when we left that day, I thought, I have ruined these kids, you know. It's just like, I mean, they had to just be horrified at what they saw. And I just always felt that's what happened. Well, about 10 years ago, I had an email from one of the boys that I taught in that 8th grade class. And he said, I looked you up on the internet, and I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciated you as a teacher. And I was just so glad to read that. And so I thought, you know, I'm scheduled to talk in St. Louis in the next spring. I'm going to write to Greg and just see if I could get together with him. And so we did. So when we were having a conversation, he said to me, I asked him what he did for a living. And he said he was a carpenter, and he said, I do a lot of home things. You know, I said, I have my own business, and, you know, I do a variety of things. And then he said, and I love going to homes of old people because they just mean so much to me. And, you know, it all started when you took us to that nursing home. And I thought, oh, I am redeemed. Who would have thought it, you know? But and there's a song, if you go online, John Prine, P-R-I-N-E, he has a song called Hello in There. I wish everyone of any age would see it, because John Prine wrote that when he was young. He was like in his 20s, but when he was younger than that, he used to deliver papers to a care center. And he just got to know the older people there. And he wrote that song for them. And it's all about the loneliness of older people. And you see all these faces of people. You see people sitting alone, you know, just kind of looking out into space. And the refrain of it is, you know, just say hello, hello in there, hello. And it's that acknowledging people. But I think if we could ever have a program, especially as our culture gets older, where we could, you know, have older people mentor younger ones, I think it would just be great, because I think we could learn a lot from each other, really. I love being with my very young cousins here in the city, 2nd and 10th grade. I sometimes take care of them, and Jacob is in 2nd grade, and I did a little scavenger hunt for them. I'll end with this. And so I had him look for things that were square and soft, and one of them was wrinkled. And anyway, he had everything filled out, and he came to me and he said, I can't find anything for the wrinkled one. And I just said, and he started laughing, and I started laughing, and I thought, you know, but it's so good to just acknowledge, you know, that we're older. Oh, I'll tell you one more. I'll read you a poem from here. My favorite poem of all of them. And then I really will be quiet. I'd love to hear from you.
We came to hear you, you know, Joyce.
I'm going to talk a long time. This is called Treated Like an Old Lady. Up to the table she breezes, the frisky young waitress with definitely dyed blonde hair. Forcing a full-faced smile, she asks, what would you like to drink? Maybe a strawberry fizz or one of our specialty iced teas? The 2 old ladies she addresses ignore the unconscious put-down and inquire about 2-for-1 drinks. The youthful eyes widen in surprise, blink when she takes their order, a vodka gimlet and a scotch on the rocks. Hey, young thing, we may be wrinkled, maybe gray-haired and walk slowly, but we still have a lot of zest in our bones. We can handle those 2-for-1 drinks, and don't you forget it. That really happened. Enough for me, but what about you? Do you have any connections, any comments, anything that you'd like to add to this? Also quiet and attentive.
I will.
Yes. Will you tell us who we are? Who you are?
My name is Mary Monks, and your talk has really touched me. And I have an aunt, my mother's younger sister, who is 105 years old. She is still living at home on her own. She is still active in her community. She is still involved in the local historical museum that she was very much a part of founding and curating. She's an avid reader, although most of what she reads now is audio, because she has macular degeneration. But one of her daughters and I were able to partner to find one of those large electronic magnifying devices for her. And it has reopened up the world for her in terms of print. So, anyway, it's that workaround, you know.
Adjusting. She's adjusting, but she's exploring. She's active. I mean, you have a wonderful mentor in her. My goodness. Yeah.
I know, and my mother, who is deceased, was her sister, and my mother had a very similar kind of way about her. Stayed curious in the world until the end of her life.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Mary. Thank you. Thanks. Yes.
Well, I'd be exactly the opposite.
Okay.
I thoroughly enjoyed your book. When I got to the prayer for taking naps, I know you understood life.
I had to put that one in there.
I say it many times a day.
Oh, good. Just before you go to sleep, right?
I don't know. I never finished it.
I love it. That's great. What else? Yes.
I grew up on a farm that my grandparents lived on the same acreage in their own home. And so the children, parents, and grandparents were all working together in a farm situation. My entire life, that's all I know, is having my grandparents
nearby. Having your grandparents, like you say, in a farm situation where they're all around. And it's so not true for so many, but grandparents, if they are there, they can be such wonderful mentors, can't they? I mean, you just absorb how they're aging and their lessons that they teach.
And I didn't realize I had 2 brothers, so there were 3 children, but there were always 4 adults around. So I grew up where there were always more adults than children.
Wow.
And learned how to speak to and work with grandparents differently than parents.
Okay.
And yet no one sat us down and told us that, but I just knew I could say things to Mom with a different tone, probably, than I should to Grandma.
And
I did learn to, and Grandma, like this woman, she lived to be 102, so she was in and out of the nursing home, not that she needed to be there, but she was afraid to live at home alone. And so we kept her house as she would, and she'd come to the house in the summer, go back to the nursing home in the winter, or assisted living, and so she had that ability to be where she was comfortable, but we always said it was your decision what you wanted to do, and we would accommodate her.
You know, there's so many things in what you've just shared. You know, I think first you kept adjusting to her aging, you know, and you were so respectful of her, you know, asking her what she wanted, what she needed. And there's such a difference than in just pushing older people around and deciding for them. I mean, sometimes they need help with that, but you're so fortunate to have had that.
We were. The only thing that was between my mother and I is I said, how on earth did you live so close to your mother-in-law? And she said she has her own house.
That was good. A little separation helps. Yeah, thank you. you, all of you. You've been sitting a long time in those little chairs there that don't have any cushions on them. So I'm going to stop and thank you all so much for coming. I know it was a rainy day. I said to Jan when I came in, well, either because of the rain, a lot of people will come or nobody will come. So hey, thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And Joyce will be signing books right up here. You can pick them up and pay for them. And thank you for coming.
One thing I would say, I know